The air reeks with the sweet smell of infection. Flesh rots all around as the glowing metallic being steps up to the monsters rushing toward it. It feels the sun at its back as it raises a sword. The two monsters look like beasts, but the spikes and slime reveal that they can only be the denizens of the infection dungeon, and thus are threats. One jumps forward to slash with its claws, only to be met with a magical shove. The other beast, covered with pus and mucus, slips around the barrier, though that is met by a blade. But the moment the skin parts, bodily fluids shoot out from the creature and into the visor of the metal person. The glow on its face flares as the infected blood burns off. It dashes forward to the beast and slashes again. This time, the cut bursts with a crack, almost like thunder. The mucus monster falls to the ground, if not dead, at least incapacitated. But the metal falls forward, thrown by the spiked monster. The creature raises another claw to finish it off when another pulse meets the sharp bone. This time, though, the move completes. The claw falls to the face of the armored figure and scratches the visor, but with no force from the rest of the body, as it now sits separated, burning coals on the ground. The person stands back on its 2 feet, glowing just a little dimmer now. Hiya! I'm the Inkwyrm, they, them pronouns, and welcome to the Nook. That opening scene was written according to the creature we're creating today. So if you like that monster, stay tuned to see how it was made and how you can use it for your table. This is a series I call Dungeon Deck, where we make strange creatures and NPCs for TTRPGs, including a creature card with art, stats, ability names, and core phrases. Now, with that all out of the way, let's get started. As always, we begin with the art prompts. So here we draw 7 cards and select 4 to use for our monster. This time we drew a gangly arm, some sharp ears, a melty face, 4-fingered hand, ritualistic sword, foot, and a grasshopper leg. Since we're experimenting with this new drawing tablet today, I want to go with something sharper, more angular. So let's go with the pieces that push in that direction. Bug leg, ears, sword, and arm. This gives a thin vibe, something that's closer to a person rather than a monster, but I'll try complicating that as we go. So what can we make from this? Well, I've been seeing some awesome art about a certain story set in the time before time. Bionicle. So, as I went on with this experimental drawing process, the illustration veered in that direction. This gave the final product much more of a mechanized direction while still playing into that sharp, angular vibe. Alrighty, now that we have the setup for the visuals, let's move on to the lore. With the lore, I want to establish a couple themes or inspirations that help guide the narrative for this monster. First one is easy, that art, which I suppose in turn includes Bionicle. Okay, but that requires a very specific location-based mystery in order to support the sort of Bionicle-esque lore. So what location could support this mystery? Well, how about the Breathing Continent? For those of you who don't know, the Breathing Continent is a setting that I've gradually been building up with various Dungeon Deck episodes, making monsters who live there. The Breathing Continent is a land made of flesh and bone with all that entails. Random eyes, hands, and mouths sprout out of the ground. Infections cause dungeons to open up from the earth. And now, one more monster will be added to these lands. Adding this mech-like monster to the Breathing Continent allows me to couple it with a cool detail. Metal is rare on the continent. And not just that, but rare enough that most metallic objects are really just bone painted to look shiny. Though there are some pieces that have been imported from other continents or recovered from the dungeons that open up deep within the continent's body. And maybe even a little bit more has been taken from the blood of the land itself. However, that's not a reliable method, as a person alone has about 3/4 of a gram of blood in their body, meaning that you need hundreds of people's worth of blood just to make a sword. And to make a whole suit of armor, or moreover, a body, it would take extreme amounts of wealth and resources, let alone the skills that are impossible to learn without the metal to practice. So, this monster cannot be from the breathing continent. Well, what is it doing there then? For now, hiding out by the entrance of what seems to be a deep, heavily infected dungeon, it's making sure that nothing gets out anymore. It's living, it's learning, it's testing itself, growing strong enough to face the depths. There are no other adventurers in the area. Nothing but a small fishing village near the dungeon. That village trades with this creature, giving it tools and insight into what could be happening under the skin of the land. The village is not well connected because of the dungeon as well. Before the mech-like monster washed on shore in its cylindrical container, creatures spilled out of the dungeon, harassing and raiding the nearby trading lines, inching closer and closer to the village, eventually cutting it off completely. But now things are growing again. Maybe there could be even a chance for the trade lines to reconnect. Maybe an adventuring party could come over and they could investigate the dungeon and help clear out the infection. But until then, the Guardian will stand firm and build up its own strength to make the trip into the Underdermis by itself. Now, if some things are a bit confusing about that lore section, I actually have a playlist with all the Breathing Continent videos here in the upper right corner. Feel free to give that a watch once you're done. I hope to get this channel off the ground, so to do that, I must accede to the algorithm's demands. So if you enjoy the video or want to use this monster for your campaigns, would you mind dropping a small donation of a like down below? Thank you very much. Now, let's get to the comments question. If you washed to a beach near a fishing village on a land made of meat, what would you do first? Tell me y'all's plans in the comments below. I'd personally try and hide and scout out the area and see if there's anything I should avoid. Next up, let's grab that creature card and fill it in. First off will be the name. In Bionicle, names tend to be 2 or 3 syllables long, with them usually being like a lone vowel or consonant vowel combination, like Lewa, Onewa, Matoro. So let's go in that direction. I'll actually roll some random letters and pull together the name from that. Okay, Ujaru will be their name. Ujaru. But in addition to that, there tends to be a title or honorific, like Toa for warrior, Taraga for elder, or something else related to their roles or allegiances. Let's go for Gari, since that sounds a bit like guardian. And finally, the elemental affinity is usually part of the designation. For this creature, we kind of have 2. The first is metal, but the second is this power that flows through Gari Ujaru. Let's give it that power and say that it's mana. So Ujaru, the Gari of mana, and we'll use they, it pronouns for them since this creature has no real attachment to any sort of binary gender system. Next up are the abilities. These will help illustrate what Ujaru can do and give us a general direction on how they guard and explore the entrance to the dungeon. Let's start with that sword. It's most like the Indian Kora in Blade Profile, a heavier sword for chopping and executions. However, there are a bunch of hanging threads with balls throughout the sword. On top of that, it has this sort of lightning-esque mana running along the edge. Well, let's say that the lightning and hanging parts are connected. Maybe those balls help store mana more locally for quicker, maybe even instant release into the blade. So let's name it something like Mana Shock Kora. This will maintain the origins of the blade profile while pushing the idea that the strongest part of the sword is the power that's running through it. Next up is that offhand. It looks sort of like a taser, but I wonder if it's more of how Ujaru channels its mana and serves as sort of a parrying tool for it. That part of its body looks thicker and more sturdy as well. So let's toss the mana channeling and parrying tool together and call that hand Shunt Wands. This can push that idea that this hand is used to channel the mana, but also to turn aside blows that come at Ujaru. Finally, the whole body seems to have this power running along it. Panels look like they channel as much power as wires would, but instead of this shielded cord, it's a good chunk of the chest that just glows. So let's go for mana charged metal. This pushes that emphasis of metal as part of Ujaru's body, but also the idea that this isn't working like a normal creature. Overall, these abilities present Ujaru as a strange mechanical being, something or someone that powers itself with mana and uses that power source in everything it does. It's an offensive powerhouse, unintended, but does not lack in defense. The Gari of Mana presents itself as somewhat of a duelist and a tank, but most of all, out of place on a continent made of meat. Now we have the stats. We'll be using the D&D 5e stat spread, but the numbers will refer to the modifiers instead of the stat counts themselves. Strength. This will be quite high, as Ujaru is able to wield a traditionally two-handed blade with just one attachment point. 4 points. Constitution. Again, very high. To be able to push through even the most upper levels of a dungeon on one's own is an achievement in durability. 4 points. Dexterity. Not as high, but still decent. Those lanky limbs don't look clumsy at all, though the Gari of Mana is no acrobat. 2. Intelligence. Here's where things start to turn around. Having nearly complete amnesia means that book smarts are out the window. The only knowledge that's left is Ujaru's name, their title, and the local language. -2. Wisdom. Again, amnesia. Few directives, but there is a vague feeling that they need to stay around the dungeon. It makes one wonder what would happen if that dungeon were completely cleared. What would Ujaru do after that? -1. Charisma. Strange and antithetical to the entire land. No matter what, Ujaru would not be easily accepted. At least they aren't rude on top of it all. 0. These stats present a physical and combative powerhouse, but one that has little direction and even less ability to enforce a change on its own. There's a reason Ujaru has been hiding until now. Finally, we have the core phrases. These are a set of statements or questions that help characterize monsters and guide DMs on how to play these creatures in a unique and interesting way. This time, I'm going to take a good amount of inspiration from Bionicle's 3 virtues. Connect. Attachments better the whole. Ujaru believes that living without affecting others is a waste. It becomes a void where a person could have been. It wishes that at the very least its life has an effect on some kind of greater whole. It acknowledges that on this continent, the Gari of Mana cannot be part of that whole. It can only create a connection. Improve. Stagnancy fights against progress. This strange creature is one that grows despite the perception of their body. Ujaru wishes to keep becoming better, to not impede others. They understand that a lack of change is what makes up a machine, an automaton, and they are not that. They are Ujaru, the Gari of Mana, and they will keep making themselves better at something every day of their life. Dream. Goals control the future. When someone sets a goal, they create a vision of what is to come, one that can be brought into being through their own powers. Ujaru is a strong believer of the powers that are granted to those with goals, plans, and most of all, dreams. What their dream is unknown at the moment, but at the very least, their current goal is easy to find. Dive deeper into the dungeon and eventually clear it out, with or without help. These core phrases give Ujaru a level of philosophical thought and present them with a sense of responsibility to this undefined whole. It lets them see their space on this continent made of meat and continue forward despite whatever horrors they may see. When players encounter this creature, they may misunderstand what is going on and maybe even get violent. But if that happens, the Gari of Mana would have so much to show these foolish people. And that's that. It was nice to start getting back to a regular schedule again after the mess that happened recently. But more than that, it was wonderful to try out this new art style. Let me know what you think of it. I certainly learned a lot and hope to keep improving as I explore this new direction for the channel with a digital art focus. I'll be back again in 2 weeks with another episode of Dungeon Deck, but I want to let y'all know that I have a surgery scheduled for the 28th, and it may affect the upload schedule. So I'm working to make sure it doesn't, but fingers crossed. So thank you for coming back and enjoying my stuff. This channel has already become a major part of my life that I don't know what I would do without. With that, let's bring this video to a close. For those of you with dark skies, good night. And if you have bright days, good morning. Whatever part of the world you're from, I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Goodbye!